Welcome to Weencast. Ween off the cuff. I am your Ween. Today, Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 5, Tales in a Jugular Vein. This episode is about Jughead writing 4 comic book horror stories and then describing them to Veronica. And of course, as he describes them, they're acted out by the cast. You might be thinking, is this the apex of Riverdale's merging of form and content? Is Riverdale wrapping back in on itself finally by becoming a comic book after being a TV show of a comic book, and now it's a TV show of a comic book and it's a comic book again? And the answer would be yes. 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 The episode opens with Mayor Clifford Blossom, Principal Featherhead, and Dr. Werther's plotting in Thornhill's vast, cavernous Great Hall, having kind of a evil Twin Peaks guys meeting, discussing how luckily Ethel was shipped off to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy and has been forced to enter a vow of silence so her account of her parents' murder can't be heard. But the PTA is still upset about these graphic, horrifying murders that happened in their town, and Werther's, Clifford, and Featherhead need to shore up control of the town somehow. And Werther's, whose first name is revealed to be Friedrich, which I think makes the connection between Friedrich Werther's and Frederick Wertham undeniable, explains that they need to blame comic books for teen violence and that comic book writers are degenerate. And of course, we fast cut to Jughead going into the office at Pep Comics. And so Werther's and his fellow creepy old guys plot evilly to somehow blame comic books and shift the discourse away from, oh my god, who murdered Ethel's family? Over in the office of Pep Comics, Jughead goes to see the editor-in-chief, finds out everybody else in the office is ill, and so Jughead has to write a whole episode, a whole issue himself, and he decides he's going to write about teens, horror about teens, and there's going to be an evil Crypt Keeper style host who is an evil janitor. It's going to be called a homeroom of horrors. And so he rushes home to his train car to start writing it. And after a while, Veronica shows up, and she wants Jughead to take her to the movies to see Diabolique, but he can't because he's got to finish writing this issue. So she offers to listen to his stories and, toss around ideas with him. And so we go into the first story. And the first story, I believe, is called Get Your Head in the Game. And it is about Dilton Doily and how Dilton Doily is so bad at sports, and he's so bad at sports, and he tries to get in the basket, and he keeps failing to get the basketball in the basket, and the coach makes everybody else run laps until Dilton can finally get a basket. So afterwards in the locker room, they're all bullying him, and Julian stuffs him in a locker, and Archie doesn't even come back to save him, even though Archie's a little bit guilty about it. And there's all kinds of comic book like titling and narration boxes and forced color. And it turns out Dilton is terribly claustrophobic, and so when he's locked in the locker overnight, he goes mad and grabs a fire axe and beheads the whole basketball team and uses their heads as basketballs. And that's story number 1. And obviously Veronica's like, yeah, go Dilton. Fuck Julian Blossom. He's got no goddamn eyebrows. Cut his head off, uses a basketball. I don't give a fuck. But of course, the last head that we see uses a basketball is Archie's and KJ. This is actually a tour de force episode for KJ, honestly. And KJ makes a crazy dead face while he's getting used as a basketball. And Jughead explains to Veronica that comic books are bite-sized morality tales, and Werther's totally wrong. They don't have bad morals. They're all about punishing rule breakers and punishing people for having lustful sex and stuff. And Veronica's like, lustful sex, you say, Jughead, forgetting that he's allergic to sex and that he hates women, but she'll be reminded by the end of the episode. So, story number 2. I don't remember what it's called, but it's not important because you'll get the gist of it. Archie finds himself stranded at Thornhill one stormy night. Oh, God. Oh. This episode was so powerful, it's exhausted me. Archie finds himself stranded at Thornhill one dark and stormy night with a flat tire. So he prevails on Nana Rose to invite him in, but she warns him that there's no power, so it's quite dark. But they do have a fire, so he can sit by the fire and get warm. And while they're sitting there, Archie is ensorcelled by this beautiful portrait of a beautiful lady. It's Cheryl, obviously. Um, and Nana Rose explains that that's her granddaughter, Cheryl, and that if Archie's going to stay overnight to wait out the storm, he has to remain in his room all night with the door locked because her granddaughter, Cheryl, is sexually insane and creeps around at night looking for someone to do sex on and is rapacious and ravenous. And so, of course, Archie's like, oh, rapacious, you say? Ravenous, you say? Sexually insane, you say? And so, he purposely leaves his door open and sleeps only in his boxer shorts. And of course, just as he hoped, under cover of night, Cheryl enters the bedchamber and seduces him in darkness. And then we cut away with a page flip transition. And then he's at breakfast the next morning with Nana Rose, and she's like, "Oh, Sonny, did you sleep well?" And Archie's like, oh, "I had an incredible night." And Nana Rose says, "I hope you kept the door locked for my beloved granddaughter. What happened to her was she went on a tropical adventure and she contracted a rare tropical wasting disease, a type of leprosy that made all of her flesh fall off, and it's horribly contagious." And Archie's like, "Contagious?" And Nana Rose says, "Yes, and she's not long for this world, and that's why I try to make her final days on Earth as delectable as possible." And that's when we learn that Archie was sexually entrapped. Nana Rose put the nails in the road to force Archie to stop at Thornhill with a flat tire and come into their house and be sexually entrapped by Cheryl because Cheryl needs sexual tributes. And now Archie's contagious and diseased with rare leprosy, and there's a humorously stupid explanation for why Nana Rose doesn't have rare leprosy. And then Cheryl emerges dressed as a bride, but then Archie looks around at her and she's a fucking leprosy corpse bride. Oh fuck! Whoa! And Veronica's a little bit grossed out by this one. It's pretty sketchy. She points out that Jughead is obviously just adapting the Archie Cheryl plot from the last couple episodes. Also, that now everybody has heard that they didn't even have sex. And Veronica's like, "Couldn't you and I make out or do something, Jughead?" And he's like, "No, I gotta keep working. I gotta keep working." So then there's the third story. I think it's called Beehive or something like that. And it's about how Betty is feeling down. She's feeling like a total plain Jane, and none of the boys give her any attention because she's not as hot as the other girls. So she decides to get a new haircut. So she goes to the salon and she gets her hair done by, I shit you not, the mom from Hairspray, which is fitting because the episode is all about Hairspray. So I can't think of a better way to describe the hairdresser that would not somehow be construed as offensive other than the mom from Hairspray. And the hairdresser, she offers to give Betty a beehive, which is all the rage in Paris and London. And Betty's like, "Oh, ooh la la." But the trade-off of the beehive is it can never be undone. You have to shellac your hair like that forever, and you just have to keep putting more and more hairspray on it. And she goes along with it. So the mom from Hairspray does her hair up, and so Betty just keeps hairspraying, and the boys are into it. They're all seduced. Archie, Julian, Dilton, everybody is ensorcelled, and all the girls, Cheryl, Veronica, are jealous of Betty's amazing huge hair. And so Betty's going a little bit mad with power. She's never letting her hair relax. She gets Archie to finally go out with her, and they go to Pops and um, talk about how great it is now they're together, and they do some incredible 1950s dancing, and KJ really puts his whole pussy into it. But then suddenly Betty has a seizure and starts foaming at the mouth and falls down and dies. And like, oh my god. I think Archie literally says, "Oh my god, Betty!" With another really killer line delivery from KJ Appa. And so Dr. Curdle Jr., girl boss, we stand. Dr. Curdle Jr. does an autopsy on Betty. He uses the pizza cutter saw and cuts open the top of Betty's head to discover that inside of her beehive is full of spiders. Because her hair has been so shellacked that a black widow spider made a nest in there and laid eggs, and then all the eggs hatched while they were at Pops, and they chewed their way down into Betty's skull and ate her brain. And understandably, Veronica points out that this story is bullshit. This story is fucking stupid, Jughead. And she also points out total double standard that Jughead keeps writing these stories about evil, disgusting women, um, and boys are really no better, also obsessed with their appearances, and that Jughead should write more girl bosses. And Jughead's like, yeah, totally. And Veronica doesn't see how obviously it's going to backfire. It's going to be his most misogynist story yet. Fourth story. And this is truly the apex story because this is an Archie story. This is an Archie story. The story opens with the evil janitor establishing how Archie is fucking stupid. Archie is dumb, and he has to choose between Betty and Veronica, but he can't choose between them, and he's leading them both on. And he goes on dates with Betty 3 nights of the week, and he goes on dates with Veronica 3 nights of the week, and he takes Sunday off to rest, and he also drinks a lot of coffee to stay up. And Betty and Veronica both know he's dating the other girl, and they both complain, but Archie continues to lead them on, telling each of them that they're his favorite, telling them what they want to hear, and telling all the boys, like Julian, about how he's got both girls. He's leading them on. He just tells them whatever they want to hear, and they believe him. Until Valentine's Day rolls around. And this year, Valentine's Day is on a Sunday, so Archie's in big trouble, right? And so he's got to figure out a plan so he can survive dating them both on Valentine's Day, on the day that he usually dates no one. And Betty and Ronnie have a big fight about who's going to get to go out with Archie on Valentine's Day. But in the course of the fight, they discover that he's been lying to both of them and telling each other's secrets. And Cheryl, who's also there, points out they've been completely led on. So the two of them go to confront Archie about which one of them he's going to take out for Valentine's Day. And Archie's like, well, gosh, girls, I'm probably just going to be with my mom. It's the first Valentine's Day since my dad died, and, I don't want her to be alone. And they're like, oh, that's sweet, Archie. You're a good kid after all. So instead, the two of them go out on a Valentine's Day date together. But while they're at Pop's, they catch Archie with Cheryl. He wasn't with his poor widowed mother at all. He was taking Cheryl out on a third type of date. So Betty and Veronica swear revenge, and they corner Archie and pretend to be unaware of his philandering ways and offer him a threesome. And Archie's like, oh shit, I'm in. And they invite him to do it with them in the shop class because it's soundproof. And so when Archie meets them at shop class because it's soundproof, they also offer him some more coffee. But the coffee is drugged. He has like a crazy cartoon head moment where he goes and passes out. And when he wakes up, he's restrained on one of the work tables of shop class. And Betty and Veronica are getting out the saw. And it's like a big saw, like a big motor power tool saw that's affixed to the ceiling. And they have to like bring it down and slowly whir it towards him. And they're so excited, they're giggling and they're delighted. And they saw Archie in half down the middle, and once again, KJ Appa delivers here with his screams and his writhing agony. He sounds almost like Fry from Futurama. He's going like, ah! And then Betty and Veronica cut him in half, and they each get to keep half. Veronica has the top half, and Betty creepily has the bottom half, and they're happy. Beautiful. At this point, Veronica's over Jughead. She notes that all his stories are misogynist, they're unpleasant for girls, although I think they're hilarious, so, you know, different strokes for different folks. And Jughead's like, it's just a comic book, Veronica. I don't hate women. But she dumps him right there because she is a true girl boss and she doesn't need that kind of bad energy in her life. And she's right. Fuck Jughead. He's pretty funny though. Um, and so Jughead goes to turn in his story because at least he has four good comic book horror stories, even if girls hate him for some reason. But meanwhile, he's not the only one publishing, because Dr. Werther's is publishing scary editorials about comics called things like Slaughter of the Innocent, that talk about how the innocence of our children must be preserved by any means necessary. Um, and he's trying to follow the plan that he and Clifford and Featherhead made at the beginning of the episode, where they're going to put everybody into a fervor about comic books, and so they won't worry about the actual problem of a murderer in their town. And we can see that Werther's is definitely going to go up against Jughead soon, which makes sense because the actor who plays him is also the actor who played the evil principal in season 4, who tried to stop Jughead from writing his rip-off Hardy Boys stories. So the cycle repeats. Jughead, talks with his editor about his stories. Editor likes the stories. He notices Jughead's a little down, but tells him, "Oh, fuck girls, basically. Forget girls. Um, you know, uh, girls come and go, but your name is in print forever." And he decides to give Jughead a byline and the name Jughead Jugular Jones. And Jughead, the narrator of Riverdale, not Jughead, the character, or Jughead, the narrator of Jughead's comic books, says, and this line from my editor was more prophetic than I could have known. And then we have a split screen of him on one side and Dr. Werther on the other, so foreshadowing a showdown between Werthers and Jughead in the near future. Um, Basically, I thought this episode ripped. This episode was fucking hilarious. Um, I can think of literally at least two professors of mine from my undergraduate years who are presumably losing their minds about this episode and the camp aspect and the comic book medium aspect and how just beautifully executed the visuals of this episode are, how perfectly on point the crazy performances are. Um, just literally a killer episode. uh, not like could not have asked for more from 1950s Riverdale than to do. 1950s Archie parody horror serial killer comic book in comic book style. There's no there's no defeating that. There's no second guessing that level of artistry from Roberto and the team. Um, Phenomenal. Phenomenal. Another great episode this week. Love love that Jughead is finally canonically a misogynist. We finally brought it back around, and interested to see if this thread of Jughead being a misogynist will be picked up by the fact that his future present girlfriend Tabitha, you know, is going to return allegedly at some point soon, and reminded him that he was supposed to literally be promulgating social justice, and instead he hates women. um, so really excited to see if he's gonna get some kind of epic call out post for that. Love that Vughead canon lasted only one episode. That's perfect. That's flawless. Um, Riverdale keep on baiting people no matter their sexual orientation. Everything on Riverdale is bait, and that's what I think Riverdale's critics don't understand. You can't. Riverdale is like the game. If you thought about her, you already lost. Wow. Yeah, amazing episode. I'm so excited for where we are going with this storyline about are comic books evil or not. So excited to see what the meaning of that storyline is going to be, what the conclusion of that storyline is going to be, since we know canonically that Riverdale is comic books. I mean, in real life, but also in the show as of last season when we had the Riverdale crossover and we went to the bunker and there was the Jughead who was God. Um, that's, I think, whatever conclusion the show comes to in that regard is going to be great. It's going to be phenomenal. I'm going to love it, obviously. Obviously, I'm going to love it. Uh, Also, really into the way that Jughead made Archie a kind of a villain or a bad guy or a morally suspect in all of these stories that he wrote. I think that's really fascinating, effective. It also kind of has that air of like the person that you have a crush on, but you don't have really the like emotional maturity to process the feelings that you're experiencing towards them. So you kind of like always feel like you you wish they would just like fucking die all the time. Maybe that was just me. Um, and so you like torture their sim a lot. Again, maybe that's just me. Serial killer gene, you know. Um, that's something that I think is worthy of analysis in this episode. Kind of everything was worthy of analysis in this episode. It was just a killer episode. It was just a banger. It was just a fucking banger, you guys. It was an episode where everybody in Riverdale pretended to be Riverdale, and it was a horror comic, and it was the 1950s. And at one point, Archie drinks poisoned coffee, then he's drugged, and he goes, and that's kind of how I'm feeling, right now watching this episode. I'm feeling kind of, and that's where I like to be. That's where I like to be. Um, yeah, just good, unclean fun from our friends at Riverdale. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you to everyone on Riverdale. Thank you, KJ Appa in particular. Uh, this has been Ween off the cuff. I am your Ween.